Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Dancing with Damage. I'm Ian, your resident philosopher.
And I'm Abby, your resident author.
Today, we're going to talk about the steps after the School of Ruling, including semi-constitutional legislation, which sounds a lot of fun to talk about, as well as maybe graduating to Act 3 in the Social Blueprint. So if you have a copy of the Social Blueprint, thank you for picking that up, and you would be following along at Chapter 29. And again, perhaps, depending on how wordy I get, maybe we'll get into Act 3. Hey, Abby.
Indeed. How exciting. We're almost at Act 3. I feel like we just started at Act 0. Now we're almost done Act 3. Or no, we're starting Act 3.
You know, if we had started at Act 1, like normal people, we'd already be at Act 3. We've really flummoxed ourselves, hoisted by our own petards,
Indeed.
you might say. I don't know what a petard is.
I don't know what a foist is.
I think it's a verb. But you know what? We don't know. So we're going to keep going. And it's okay to not know. So in the last episode, we talked a bit about how we recommend a 15-year program in order to get a license, just like people get medical licenses
Or a baby license.
That's a good comparison. For eligibility for elections in major democratic positions. And we sort of see this as maybe like a 15-year program, something lengthy, that's not well remunerated, not well compensated. So this would sort of drive away people who were looking for leadership in order to abuse the power or the riches of the potential position. And also a program that really entrenched its candidates in different roles around a country. So they really get to know their nation well, are seen by the people of the nation who would vote for them, and they can gain wisdom and understanding of how those different jobs they'll be basically leading work. So then these candidates graduate, good for them. You know, we doff our caps, we throw our caps in the air in celebration. Hooray!
Huzzah!
Huzzah! We're many years down the road because this generation right now, Abby and I don't think would be ready to sort of want these schools of ruling, but we anticipate that down the road, a large enough portion of the population will want them, and so they will come to pass. And we also hope that the candidates who go through there will be publishing books.
Like the Social Blueprint?
Like the Social Blueprint, but they can't use Planthead. That will be confusing.
That would be confusing. Okay, we're on chapter 29. So once we finish this chapter, we're more than halfway down the book.
How many pages are in the book in total, Abby?
In total, numbered pages? That's a really good question that I should know the answer to. 227.
And what page is chapter 29 on, for example?
Well, 7 of those pages are the glossary. Chapter 29 is on page 132.
I'm not good at math. I think we're exactly halfway through. No, we're more. We're good. So anyway, now we're going to talk a little bit about, I thought we had at the end of last episode, I sort of cut myself short, which is probably everyone's happy about. It's not in the book so much, but certainly it would be interesting if students going through the School of Ruling who then get their names, eventually can go on a ballot to be potential rulers of major democratic positions. They're going to have books out with various promises they make that are in print.
Black and white, my friends, or another color should they choose.
And Abby, have you ever experienced in your lifetime a politician making a promise on the campaign trail and then potentially not making best efforts to fulfill that promise once elected?
Without making any jokes, yes, I have.
You have seen that. And in fact, there are some websites that are dedicated to promise trackers of politicians, especially leaders of countries, to see what they say they're going to try and do versus what best efforts they actually make. So it would be kind of interesting, I think, in this stage of the acts, many decades from this current generation, for politicians to be sort of held accountable for misleading individuals. I'm hopeful that going through the crucible of the School of Ruling would sort of ferret out people who would deliberately lie about policy they intend to implement. But certainly a good idea for any country would be to sort of punish leadership. Like it would be a sort of a criminal thing, wouldn't it, Abby? To deliberately mislead people and trick them.
I think it would be. And I think that there aren't enough measures in place to hold people accountable nowadays, because it seems that you just need to trigger another election is our only recourse. But the process to making that happen is complicated. And I couldn't even confidently say, as someone who literally teaches political science, I couldn't confidently say what steps need to be in place and if those steps are in place, even if it would result in an election. I think that, especially in other democratic nations around the world, there's a lot of confusion about how to hold someone accountable. It sort of seems like once you're elected, we're just dealing with that for approximately 4 years until something else happens. So I think it is positive to have a way to hold people accountable, because if you're in the highest office in the land, you should have the most
Oxygen, because you're so high up.
You should have the highest standard of delivery.
Did I frighten you by shouting oxygen at you?
I was frightened.
Not many people have the word oxygen showed at them, but Abby experienced that today. I mean, obviously I agree with her, but I just saw an opportunity because the office was high up. So, you don't want to get altitude sickness. But Abby's right. Notwithstanding my interruption, it would be interesting again, it's not in the book, but just as a
anecdote,
as a amplification of how we see things going in the future for democracies, to actually have criminal repercussions for leaders who can be shown to have deliberately misled people and truly not made best efforts to follow up on political promises, because the direction of a nation really is impacted by that. And in any event, the school of ruling, how fun will that be? And then you get out, and one thing we can use to our advantage, I think, Abby, that will still be around, of course, in this age of the axe, is social media.
Yeah.
Now, do you think people, let's take Canada, for example, do you think Canadians know the people they're voting for very well when they check off that ballot?
No. I think, and I stand to be corrected on this, but I remember reading some articles about this, and also we, as we've mentioned, have participated in the political sphere on 2 different occasions.
I participated in a political cube. I wasn't interested in the sphere.
But I knocked on, what was it, like 10,000 doors or something? It was a lot of doors.
More than that.
It was a lot. I knocked on the most doors in our entire riding independently as Ian's right-hand woman. And
that's only because you were campaigning at a door factory.
And a lot of people anecdotally told me that when they vote, they often don't know the name of the candidate. They just vote for the party. So if they like a certain party, whoever that candidate is, they automatically get the check mark. They might not even have heard of this candidate. They might not know if there is a candidate, but they will just look for the color or they'll look for the party, and that's just whoever it is. So no, I don't think they have any idea, for the most part, who the candidate is, let alone intimately understand who they are.
So let's draw an example of a comparison of what I'm talking about, a juxtaposition, if you will. Abby, who is your favorite celebrity, or a celebrity you really enjoy right now?
Who is my favorite celebrity?
Sure, and I don't want you to ostracize the other celebrities. So you can just pick someone in your top 5.
Julie Andrews.
Julie Andrews. And she is famous for being in The Sound of Music. Is she still alive?
Yes.
Okay.
Don't you dare question that. She is going to star in The Princess Diaries 3, allegedly, and we are so excited. Julie Andrews is not part of our nation, but she is a national treasure. We need to protect her at all costs and honor her. I don't know if she's Dame Julie Andrews, but if not, she should be.
Okay, fair enough. We'll, for the moment, assume she's immortal. Can you tell me what country she was born in?
England.
Can you tell me if she has any children?
Yes.
How many children might this person have, to your knowledge?
I'm not confident in the answer, so I'm going to pass on that.
Okay. Can you tell me some movies she's?
Yes. Mary Poppins. She was the first actor in My Fair Lady. She also starred, I think, in Cinderella. She was obviously in The Sound of Music. And then she was in Shrek 2 as the Queen. She was also in The Princess Diaries 1 and 2, and she will be in The Princess Diaries 3. And she has done some other voiceover work. She's just perfect. She is.
Okay, very good. Do you know if she has grandchildren?
She does.
So that right there is probably more information about a person than the average Canadian certainly might know about the leader of Canada. So right now it's a gentleman called Mark Carney. Seems like has very good credentials, hasn't been in power long, but I'm not sure if the average Canadian could say if he has kids or grandkids, where he was born. I mean, you would think Canada, but
Probably Canada.
probably Canada, but would Canadians be certain about that?
Do you have to be born in Canada to be prime minister, or do you just have to be a Canadian citizen? I don't know that answer.
Oh boy, because
I'm gonna
in
Google this.
2011, there was a Canadian, the leader of the Canadian Liberal Party was a fellow called Michael Ignatieff. I think it was 2011.
I know who that is.
And I seem to remember he might not have spent all his time in Canada. I don't know the answer to that. Maybe you just have to be a Canadian citizen. But what I'm driving at is,
No, you just have to be a Canadian citizen who's 18
okay,
and a member of the House of Commons.
okay, that's fair.
4 Canadian prime ministers, John A. Macdonald, Alexander Mackenzie, Mackenzie Bowell, and John Turner, were born outside of Canada. I didn't know there were that many.
I assume you have to be born on Earth, though. Nobody born on the moon, which is very discriminatory to astronauts. Because if you're going to be a parent in space, I don't know where this is going. Maybe don't have kids in space for right now. So maybe ever. What I'm getting at is, a lot about Julie Andrews' filmography. I'm not sure if you could name, the different companies, which is the equivalent of movies, sort of, that Prime Minister Mark Carney has been in.
I'm mostly certain that he was a diplomat, wasn't he? Didn't he work maybe as a diplomat, or maybe it was just as a minister going to another country, but didn't he work in finances in England in some capacity?
Yes, I think the head of the Bank of England is on his resume. But the point is, I'm not trying to pop quiz anybody on the background of leaders. What I want to ask you, listening, is, do you think we know the leaders of countries around the world, as well as we even know celebrities, for example, or our favorite sports players? Abby and I aren't big sports fans, but there are some people we run into. I think your dad would be one of them.
He knows sports stuff.
Who could give you a lot of statistics about
players
and their incomes and the history of their teams, but wouldn't be able to give that level of detail for politicians. So all this is what I'm driving at is, I like the idea of, in the school of ruling, for the people of a nation to get to know candidates as they're growing up. You can imagine if a YouTuber posted content from ages 20 to 35, and if you kind of took a passing interest in that, and especially if it was interesting content, you might feel that you had a pretty good understanding of that person.
I was just going to say that YouTube has just recently been celebrating its 20th anniversary being a platform. Mm-hmm. And it was sending commemorative jackets to all of the people for the years they spent on the platform. But I just thought it was interesting. It was still long enough for people to, if you were there from day one, to know that person really, really well.
We sort of envision not only putting out products like books or papers arguing for certain policies that a candidate would like to see once they finish the school of ruling, but also just sort of content, sort of like what Abby and I are doing right now, just so people can actually get a sense of who the individuals are. How common is it, Abby, in your experience, for a leader to be elected in a democratic country, and then it's only once the reins of powers are seized and the person is sort of safely ensconced in the driver's seat that we see the true colors of a person?
That's true. And I think Ian would agree with me on this. I feel like people can't hide their true nature for very long. It's sort of like you hear stories from people who are dating someone, and for the first 1 to 3 months, they see each other a couple times a week and it seems great. And then after that time period passes, all of a sudden it's an entire shift, and it's like you didn't know the person at all. You can only hide your true nature for so long. And I think if for more than a decade you were sharing regularly about your life and your personality and your hopes and your dreams and your thoughts, you couldn't hide if there was a major red flag for that long. You just couldn't.
And it's also nice for individuals to feel like they know the person they're voting for. That's something we experienced when we were campaigning in the elections we partook in. There was a wall to overcome to actually have a bit of a bond with the constituents you wanted to vote for you. When, before that, there wasn't much of a relationship at all. So it'd be nice for the school of ruling to actually promote a relationship for some buy-in. And like we talked about last episodes, for those tulips to feel like they could spring up and be politically active, not feeling so detached from the political system. So in chapter 29 of the Social Blueprint, we talk a bit about how different policies could be effectuated by these wise and compassionate leaders that have now passed through the school of ruling. Abby, you talked about it a bit before, how the cycle of elections, usually in democratic countries, it's around 4 years. Don't quote me on every country around the world, but it seems to me the washing cycle is about 4 years.
Yep.
Have you ever seen policies sort of been flip-flopped from one leader or party in power to the next leader and party in power?
Absolutely. I've seen them flip-flop under the same leader in party in power.
Oh no, too much flopping. Just flipping. Wait. If you flip-flop and then flip again,
Flop, flip.
you've ended up with the same flop.
You flippity-flopped.
I think my joke is flopped. But is that a desirable thing, would you say?
No, no one wants that. No one wants inconsistency. On a micro scale, if let's say you're supposed to make dinner and 5 days out of the week you make dinner and 5 days out of the week you forget, and your family is just hungry and they have to make their own dinners, that is not a good track record. And that's just a micro scale. Can you imagine running a whole country, making promises in the provinces?
Making herbe de Provence.
I was thinking because Canada has provinces.
Oh yeah.
But can you imagine if 50% of the time you knew that a leader would just fall through on their promises? How annoying would that be? Yeah.
Well, this is why we talked about at the beginning of this episode, like back in the day, a wagon comes into town and there's a salesman who's selling oil. And they say
snake oil.
How did you know? On the bottle is a snake, not a real snake. What a dangerous bottle this is. No, sure, it's snake oil. And the salesman just keeps selling the oil and makes a great profit off it, and eventually leaves town. And after that, all the villagers realize, hold on, this snake oil doesn't make me grow, I don't know,
a foot and be more beautiful and youthful, and my leg still hurts. Even My Little Pony made fun of snake oil salesmen. That is how pervasive this concept is in pop culture and society.
Wow. A low blow, certainly, for the snake oil industry. But you can imagine if that salesman, that wagon came around, what would really happen in real life is the villagers would drive them out. You can't be here anymore. No more snake oil. We don't believe you.
No more snakes.
But in the modern political climate, it seems you can just keep feeding the people snake oil and never be driven out. So certainly we would like to see a more rational change to that. But what we talk about in chapter 29, just to finish off the Act 2, is the idea that it would be good at this point in the Acts for policies that would take quite a few years, 10, 15, 20 years to see benefits from, be sort of enshrined in sort of semi-constitutional type legislation, just so a country could have some stability. And I think probably it may be even a moot suggestion, Abby, because at that stage in the Acts, it may be that the country is united behind the necessary policy and steps to take.
That's true, but I do also, just to defend our suggestion, I do like the idea of semi-constitutional legislation, because if it is sort of in the Constitution that for 20 years we will, just to go back to climate, follow this climate protocol, and we believe this is the best, and unless new science comes out and overwhelmingly shows that this is wrong, we'll just stay on this path. I think that is reassuring to people, because then if you do get a new party in power, a new person in power who may have different ideas, they can't just change course. They can't just go in and abolish. You see this more often in America, especially, where the new president comes in and just gets rid of every piece of legislation the last president enacted just because the last president was from a different party. It's pretty common. So I think it is good as an option and a safety net, because if for some reason people are like, the social blueprint's the best, we love it, we want to enact these policies, if it's not too far in the future and there haven't been generations of people changing their damage ratio, then we would still need that safety net because there would still be people who were able to maybe get past the system and potentially have the ability and the capacity to do more harm than good, which is not ideal. And you remember Gray, right? The shepherd?
You may remember Gray from such episodes as episode 2, I think he was in. So, and just to be clear of what we're talking about, most developed nations have a constitution. That's pretty common. And a constitution is sort of like a tattoo on a nation's soul. That's sort of their mission statement or the principles most important to them. And it's pretty rare to change a constitution. And then legislation is also common in countries, obviously, and that can be easily changed. We'd like to see an era where policies, if they were deemed good, had sort of a semi-constitutional nature where they were quite difficult to change in order to encourage nations to stay the course. Because let's take dog training for an example. Okay? If anybody's ever trained a dog or
tried to,
you know that it can take a long time. So let's say a couple, like Abby and I, said, okay, we're going to teach Gray to go lie down. Go lie down. And he doesn't want to. And the theory is, if you tell him to go lie down and then give him a treat, did you hear treat? Do you want a treat? You can't see this, but he sat.
He did. He sat like a good boy.
The point is, let's say you want to teach Gray to go lie down. You give him a treat every time he does it. And then maybe in a week or two, maybe he does it. But the problem is, if the couple says after 2 days, oh, it's not working, let's abandon that and try a different plan, then you never truly know if that plan was ever going to actually work. And the same way for countries, it's disheartening to see a policy that could work if it was given a bit of time, given up on and abandoned before it truly had a chance. Just like a tree, if you wanted to grow an apple tree and you planted a sapling, and then the next year people said, well, it's not growing any apples, we cut it down. That's worse than just waiting to see if in a few years it produced apples, and then you could benefit from the apples. So we see a lot of wasted resources sort of doing that. So that's why we argue for legislation that had a bit more staying power, a bit more difficult, perhaps requiring sort of a referendum to amend. We wouldn't want policies that were impossible to change once started, because it's learned that they're hopeless. Like, let's say, for example, you were trying to grow apples and you found out you planted a kiwi tree. Well, it would be a little unfair to lock countries into growing a kiwi tree now if they never wanted kiwis in the first place. So that's just something we talk about in chapter 29 if you think that's an interesting idea. But it's just a way that we think is important to lock in and create more long-term vision in governments than the short-term kind of pandering types of policies that are common nowadays. Hey, Abby.
I agree. I think generally most things that do good take time. And I think that if policy in general just shifted to the longest term benefit and the most staying power, I think it would take longer for them to work. I think it would take longer to enact, but I think it would do the most good. So I feel like shifting our focus towards just long-term policy in general is a very positive thing to do. But again, it's important that a long-term policy is based off of evidence and science and some kind of factual basis it will work, not this is the party in power, this is my opinion because it's different from the other party. Now I'm going to do everything I can to make this the policy for 10 years because I happen to be in power, therefore I have the right to do that. That is not what we want.
No.
We want people to put policy into power for a long time because it will be the most effective to fixing a problem or obtaining a solution.
Very true. And I think that pretty well brings us to Act 3. So we're going to end this episode in a little bit. A, because it's sort of a natural stopping point. B, because I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest Gray might want to visit the out of doors.
It's the opposite from the in of doors. But we can't say it because he's too smart and knows that word.
Yes. Although, just as we say that, he vanishes. So, Act 3 in the Social Blueprint is about changes to lifestyle. So we've talked about changes to education, changes to lifestyles up next. And that's because there are some changes to education that we've done. Sort of how the Social Blueprint is structured is first changing philosophy in the minds of as many people as possible. And that's about understanding damage and what we see as the unified human condition. And then it's about changing the learning of individuals through the new education system. Now it's going to be a bit more about changing the infrastructure of our day-to-day lives. And so, one thing in the social blueprint that Abby's already mentioned are, and actually this is the title of the, it's good that we've gotten here because this is sort of, you're probably wondering, why does it say playing bridge behind us? And Abby, if I take you to
Pillars at Play.
Pillars at Play.
Oh, maybe you want the first one. The first Pillars at Play.
If we go to chapter 30, and that's at 137.
Everyone open your books to page 137.
The story is about a king who's trying to lead his army over a bridge. And so the smith, or the engineer that makes the bridge, sinks 4 very deep pillars into the river. And then that way the bridge is strong and the king's troops are able to cross the bridge. So Abby, why don't you tell us what those pillars might be, and then we'll go into detail perhaps next episode so that Gray can have our attention.
Yes, I don't know if you heard him, but he was sitting beside us making some sounds throughout our discussion today because he has a lot of feelings and demands those feelings be met. He is one of those dogs that is trained but does not care. He knows what we want and just doesn't want to do it. So there are 5 pillars that we have in our book, pages 139 to 141, in case you're interested. And just their names so you can understand. And once we get to Act 3, at the end of every chapter, we sort of address which pillars specifically apply to that chapter. So one is that policy should deny damaged people the power to injure. So sort of the more damaged you are, the least power socially you should be able to have. And we'll explain this. Number 2, policy should replace lost power with a better reward because it's not fair just to take things away from people. If we deny someone power, you should give them something better, something that's more beneficial to them, something they want more. Policy should prevent isolation because, as we've said so many times, we're social creatures. We need other people, and we need to work to sort of becoming more of a community. That's something we've lost, is a community feeling. So we have to get that back. Policy should create valuable work. Again, there's already a problem with job market shifting now. Now is a great time, should you be interested, to start implementing some of these ideas because society is already primed for it. And we should make new jobs, but new jobs shouldn't be made just for the sake of making work. These should be valuable jobs that improve society. And number 5, policy should make healthier behavior easier to achieve. So to do a callback to a couple episodes ago where we talked about sugar and junk food and fast fashion and all those other things that are negative, like single-use plastic. Policy should make it so people don't have to work so hard to choose between a good and a bad option. We should make it so everyone can easily choose between good options. And if they don't have time to think about their options, or they don't have to worry about what the store is carrying at that time, if they're desperate, anything that they have the option to buy is a good option.
That is a really good summary.
Thank you.
And if I said 4 pillars before, I stand corrected. It was 5 pillars. Thank goodness for the book. Keeps us in line, which is always a good thing. So that's exactly right. So the next episode, we're excited to talk more about those policies, but essentially, yes, we're going to go outside very shortly. Essentially, in the next episode and in the next act, it's going to be all about policies that stick to one of these pillars so that the bridge to the next act, Act 4, which is the banishment of damage and a much improved, almost utopic society, can be reached. And so on behalf of all of us here, including our furry friends, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you in the next episode.
Have a great day.